Hello everybody, and welcome to this video where we're still going to continue to talk about lesson planning for CLIL, but we're going to focus more specifically on learning objectives and outcomes. So the first question I usually get when I'm talking about this topic or discussing with other teachers is the question, well, aren't learning objectives and learning outcomes the same? Well, some people may use them interchangeably when they are presenting a video or sometimes even when writing articles about objectives and outcomes. But some scholars, they actually make a difference between them. Um, let's think about a lesson this way. When you're teaching a lesson, we have goals, right? And those goals have repercussions for the teacher and repercussions for the students, right? So the two stakeholders here with repercussions for the lesson are the teacher and the students, because I, as the teacher, need to know what I need to teach. And the student needs to know what they're learning, and they need to know how they're going to be assessed. So when you frame those goals of the lesson to teachers, you're talking about objectives. When you frame the goals of a lesson to students, you're talking about outcomes. And this difference is important because even when I, as a teacher, am presenting outcomes to students, I need to be sensitive to the language. If I'm writing objectives to myself, I can use more professional language and more academic language than when writing outcomes to students. So the same concept may have a more complex objective, because that's for me, the teacher, to understand and dissect and decipher. But whatever I present to students need to be digestible and readable and understandable by my group of students. So this is a very, very important difference that we need to make here from the start. And the goal of this video is just introduce you to two different strategies that you can use for either writing objectives or for analyzing objectives, which may be your goal here if you're thinking of taking the TKT CLIL test. So let's see how that plays out. The first way of writing or analyzing objectives or strategies is the approach that we call ABCD. And each letter here stands for a different concept that goes into the objective. So let's look at each one in detail. Letter A stands for audience. So my audience are those I'm teaching, my students, my learners, right? And why is this important? Because when I am teaching a lesson, I expect the students to learn a certain behavior and to perform that behavior. Behavior here means action, right? What am I teaching them? What will they do? That action is the behavior or the condition. That's what B stands for. And it's important to make it clear who will be performing the behavior. Of course, the students will be performing the behavior. But it could be a group of students in my class, so objectives can get a little more complex than this. But let's stick to the class as a whole to make it easier. And moving on to B, as we started already talking about, B is the behavior or the actions. The best way to understand B is to ask yourself, what will the students do after this lesson is taught, or after they go through this lesson, right? And when you are looking at Bloom's taxonomy and the verbs in Bloom's taxonomy that correspond to each one of the higher or lower order thinking skills, then you are talking about behaviors, right? Behaviors are expressed in verbs in lesson plans. Condition. So the condition or the conditions are the circumstances under which the students will perform the behavior. So for example, if I'm teaching math, for example, many math concepts, they require understanding or knowing a certain concept first. So for example, if I'm teaching multiplication for the first time, right, multiplication needs to probably rely a little bit on addition, right, or heavily on addition, because multiplication is addition on steroids in a way. And so this is important. So I may have to frame that condition. Well, my students will not be able to perform this until they've learned that. This is an example, right? Of course, this will be expressed in outcomes and objectives in a different way, but I'm just giving you an example so you can understand that. And degree is the extent to which the students need to show mastery, right? Do I want 1 or 2 or 3 samples? Do I want them to do the task that I'm asking them to do in 10 minutes or in 30 minutes? Do I need 100% accuracy or 80% accuracy? What quality am I looking for? And how many samples am I looking for? Do I want them to write 3 sentences, or to solve 3 problems, or to name 3 parts of a plant in a science class? So to what degree do they have to show that they've learned? So let's look at examples. So in this slide here, the sentence in quotes is the actual objective. So let's start with the sentence in quotes. Given a specific number, learners will be able to calculate at least 2 of its factors. So let's try to identify A, B, C, and D here. The easiest one is audience, right? Of course, my learners will be my audience. That's why they're in red here, to correspond to the word audience, which has the letter A highlighted in red. Let's go alphabetically and look for behavior. Okay, behavior is action. What will my students do? Well, they will calculate factors of a number. Condition, given a specific number. So the teacher will give the number and then they will calculate. And degree, how many factors do I need? 2. I could have asked for 5, I could have asked for 3. But in this case, due to the circumstances or my audience, I need 2. Maybe later on, I'll be assessing this again and I'll be asking for 3. It really depends on how the lesson develops. So this is just to give you an idea. Let's see another example of a similar type of objective. And this time the objective is a science objective. And it says, given the diagram of a cell, students will be able to label at least 5 organelles. So they'll be given the picture of a cell and they'll be able to identify 5 of the organelles there. So audience, students. Behavior, label the organelles of a cell. Under which condition? Given the diagram of a cell. They'll see a picture, they'll see a diagram. So I'm not asking them to draw a cell from scratch, from their memory. Notice how condition is important. I may later on in the lesson ask them to draw a cell and identify the organelles in the cell that they draw. That's a higher level than just identifying the cells on a piece of paper where the cell is already drawn. So the condition is very, very important because it relates to the complexity of my assessment and the complexity of the outcome. And the degree, I need at least 5. I don't need all the organelles. I need at least 5 in this case. Later, I could ask for more. Now let's see another objective. In 3 paragraphs, students will write reasons, 1 per paragraph, and examples to support why it is important to conserve fresh water. Again, the easiest one to begin with is my audience, my students. What's my behavior? They'll write reasons and examples to support something. What is this something? Well, that relates to the condition. Coming back here, why it is important to conserve fresh water. That's my condition. And to what degree? In 3 paragraphs, right? So each reason in a paragraph. And that's what I'm expecting my students to do. Now that we've seen the ABCD approach, let's look at another approach. Actually, before that, let's look at the template. So why is this template important? Why am I going through this before going to the other approach? It's because this will help you either write objectives or analyze objectives, making sure that all the elements that you need for a complete objective are there. Okay, so you go through A, B, C, and D, and then you compose the full objective in the last cell here of the table. Now we're moving to the second approach, SMART objectives. Again, SMART, each letter in SMART stands for a different concept that is required in the objective and or the outcome, and specific relates to the questions that you should ask yourself. Are the outcomes specific or focused? Do the objectives or outcomes have a clear result or outcome itself? Are they measurable? So can they be assessed? Is the performance that I'm trying to assess observable, or can I hear it, right? It can be observable or heard. Achievable, can my students do this? Is it within participants' capacity? Can the objectives or the outcomes be achieved with the available resources that the students have? Right? Maybe I'm not giving them the resources they need, that I'm asking for a performance, which is unfair. So I need to make sure that they have the resources needed. Do the objectives or outcomes correlate with participants' needs? And can they be achieved during the time of instruction and during the time I provide for production, which will be assessed? So an objective here, an example, is by the end of the unit, learners will be able to write a script for a 2-minute video about the importance of recycling. So what's specific here? Well, my students will write, right? That's, again, the behavior needs to be a specific one, writing. How can I measure it? Well, they'll write a script. A script has certain elements that I need to look for. And I can even have a rubric to guide the students in producing the script and to guide me in assessing their production. Achievable by the end of the unit or for a 2-minute video. So I specify when they need to do it, and notice that by the end of the unit is also present in the cell time bound, right? Because it relates to both whether or not the objective or the outcome is achievable, or to whether or not it is time bound. And a 2-minute video. Again, if my students are still new to making videos, I'm going to ask them for a 2-minute one so that they can achieve it. And is my objective or is the outcome relevant? Yes, because they're going to have to write. That's a relevant task. And they're going to write about the importance of recycling, which has a connection to not only their life, but maybe the science standard that I'm teaching, right? So those are the ways that I can make sure that the objective is complete and the outcome can actually be achieved by my students. So how do I write objectives using this approach, this SMART approach? Well, there are some questions here to guide you. You want to know if outcomes are specific, make sure you use action verbs and that the outcome is clear. If you want to know that they're measurable, state the behavior. Make sure that the verb is there, the right verb. You want to know if they're achievable, make sure that it is at the student's level and they have the resources they need. Relevance comes from consistency in terms of the needs of my students. Are they doing something that is actually useful for them? If it's not useful, then I shouldn't be assessing it. I shouldn't even be teaching it, probably. And time bound, do they have enough time to finish the task? Am I providing them the support that they need for that? So you can use this to analyze an objective, this table, or you can use it to write your own objective. I hope you have found this useful. If you want to learn more about lesson planning, and make sure to watch the other video that we have about lesson planning for TKT CLIL, and make sure to watch some other videos as well that you see linked here and some others that you can find on the channel itself. All right, thank you and see you in the next video.